When I first meet the students, the first question I ask them is where do they come from and what's their family background, because with our mob, our first questions are, who are you mob, where are you from? So then I've put that back on them, and some of them don't know, some of them do know, which is great.
I'm going to talk a little bit about a tool that we use to help students reflect on themselves, because the other thing that we do when we think, oh, I've got an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander client, or I'm working in an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander context, is I need to understand those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but we forget that we also need to understand ourselves, and we need to understand where we've come from, because that has as being an impact on our interactions with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander clients as, you know, what the client comes with as well. And we're not so good at that, particularly if we're from the white Western cultural background. It's, you know, we're from the dominant culture. It doesn't get questioned a lot. It's the norm in our society. So we don't have lots of opportunities to sort of really think and critique, you know, about those values. We just take them as a given, that it's the normal way to think. And often it's not till you go overseas or you're embedded in another cultural context that you kind of start to see that actually it's not the way everybody thinks. It's the way that we think and the way that we do things. So one of the tools we use is a tool that we've sort of called My Story. And what we get the students to do at the beginning of their placement, we do a bit of an orientation process, and then we talk about, so, you know, how do you understand where you come from? What's your story? And we specifically get the students to think about what's their background, what's their cultural background, what's their educational background, what are their values, what are things that their family has brought them up to think are really important, and how might those things impact on their work with an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person. And that tool's really useful for a few reasons. One, it gets the students starting to think about that and reflect on it for themselves, and they often find that quite challenging. And usually it gives you a really quick indication as a clinical educator of which students are more self-reflective than others. And the other thing that it does is it helps, we get the students to feed that back to us, so they have to give it back to us, and we then give them some feedback, and it helps to highlight maybe some of those hidden assumptions that they're making that they probably weren't even aware they were making. So it's not done as a critique, it's not done as a critical sort of thing, it's more done as a way of helping the students start to reflect and then highlight some of the things that might be really key for them to start to question, you know, in terms of their assumptions, and even just to raise awareness that we all make assumptions, because we all do. It's just that, you know, we're not always aware that we do. So we find that a really useful tool as a reflective kind of tool.